Alright, lubing cubes. What a complicated thing. Or is it? Let's find out. Spoiler alert, it's not. But we're going to talk about it anyways, because I think it's interesting and it's something that a lot of people will know about. So, how do I lube cubes? Here's the TLDR. I hit every contact point with the lube that I want to use. When I say every contact point, I mean every contact point. So if we take this cube apart, for example, focus, camera, please. When you take apart a 3x3, for example, and you can easily apply this logic to other puzzles. I'm not going to use other puzzles to illustrate my point because I think you guys are smart enough to figure it out. See here, the way the edge and the corner fit together, all these little bits here come into contact with each other and will come into contact with each other when you turn a cube. And you'll also see that when you come up close and turn like so, and you see how everything interacts. So, when I say my way of lubing is I hit every contact point, what I mean is everywhere that plastic is going to ride against plastic, I want lube to be there. This applies to the corners, edges, and centers, and you can see how that works here. So for the most part it's hitting every little bit of it, pretty much. Maybe not so deep under the center, but you do still want to get a little bit there anyways. But you can get that with the edge, so that tends to kind of work itself out. So that's where I put the lube, and that's pretty much half of the equation. The other half of the equation is what lube do I use, and to be honest, it barely matters. So some viable lubes include Traxxas. You know? What's the word I'm looking for? Silicone. Silicone lube. High viscosity silicone lube. That is what most of the lube on the market is based off. Stuff from The Cubicle, stuff from SES, stuff from Speedcube.com. It's all based off silicone lube. That's pretty much what you want to be putting on your cubes, and these lubes will come in various viscosities. Some will be high viscosity, meaning it'll be a bit slower at first and need more breaking in, and generally leads to a more clicky feel. And then others will be lower viscosity, meaning they're a bit more watery, and will give a more smooth feel and won't take as much breaking in, but also have a tendency to maybe slow down the cube in a certain way. It's very lube dependent, because the ingredients do differ. I'm not going to say, like, you know, use all the Cubicle lubes because technology and Chris Tran and it's the best. I do appreciate a lot of what he is doing. However, you really don't need to break the bank to find a lube that generally suits you. So as for what lube to use, you generally want to aim for some sort of silicone. You know, we got thin stuff here, Lubical Speedy. We got this random shock oil from like 2013 or something. Some GAN lube down there. I don't really feel like getting it because the box is really sticky and gross. But yeah, that's how I lube my cubes. As for the lube I prefer, I generally prefer a higher viscosity, and the reason for that is I just find that the higher the viscosity, the longer it tends to last and like feel the same. It does take longer to break in, but it also takes longer to kind of wear out. So that's how I lube my cubes, like the lube I generally use and where I put it. As for what I would recommend for you, I would just recommend setting aside some amount of money, maybe 50 bucks, and buy just a bunch of different types of silicone lube, and then use your main, like not your main 3x3, but a 3x3 similar to your main as like an experiment cube, and basically just try different lubes, different combinations, and see what you like. There's never going to be a clear consensus on what the best lube is. Some kids are going to swear by SCS, Cosmic, whatever, Alien Lube or whatever they have. Others are going to say Cubicles, you know, the business. Other people will swear by Traxxas 50K, I generally fall into that camp. And others will like something else, and that's fine. So, the important thing is you want silicone lube. What you don't want is to use only Maru Lube. This stuff is basically crack for your cubes. You put it in, you think it makes it really fast because it does for like 2 solves, and then it makes it slower. Maru Lube is crack. People who use Maru Lube on their cubes exclusively are basically just crack addicts, because they put it in, it goes fast for 2 solves, and then it just gets slower because of how the dust accumulates. Don't use crack, I mean Maru Lube. Another thing not to use is silicone sprays. It is not 2010. Don't use these. Also, don't use Vaseline. Don't use hair gel. Just common sense, okay? Silicone lube. Not spray, not something else, lube. So that's what you want to use, and I guess the other things I should maybe address about how I lube my cubes. With the core, again, same logic, you hit every contact point, this does not change. So you get where the screw meets the spring, where the spring meets the plastic at the bottom of the center inside, and also where this center touches the core here. You'll notice there's like a little gap between the stalk and the core. You want to lube that area as well, because those are potentially contact points. And therefore, the logic is, if there is a contact point, you probably want lube there. So that's basically how I lube my cubes. The other thing I'll mention is how I clean cubes, because I think that's also important. Basically, I just take the whole thing apart, either wipe off the pieces first, or I'll just put them in a sink straight away filled with detergent. Let them sit there. Usually you want warm or hot water, just because it's a bit nicer on your hands. I don't know what kind of difference it really makes, I just tend to use that. You could use cold water if you want. And then I like to do a rinse after that, so after I've let them soak in soapy water of some description, I let them soak in just normal water to get the soapy stuff out. Then I dry the pieces off, either by air drying, or if there's a lot of like grease and muck that's accumulated, I'll want to wipe them off with a towel, and then reassemble like that. You can also skip the first two steps with the, soaking in soap water and normal water and just use a towel. However, I find that this does not get all of the lube off. It gets most of it off, but I'm the kind of person that wants to get as much of it off as possible. And generally speaking, it'll make your cube last a little bit longer if you do this kind of cleaning process ever so often once your cube feels like it's kind of getting a bit bad and needs a bit of a booster. You can also just like dump lube into it and just wipe bits off at will, but it's not really going to be the same. So that's how I clean cubes. However, I'm not convinced it's like the best way or anything, so clean your cubes however you want. As for how I lube cubes, I think the way I do it is the best way, or at least the best methodology for people to find what kind of lube style works for them. So pretty much no matter what, you want to be hitting every contact point, because if you don't, then that's just like an area where plastic will rub against plastic and it'll just cause like grooves and more cube dust to kind of accumulate inside the cube. So there's really no circumstance where you want two areas that are going to be in constant contact to be dry. That's the whole premise of how I lube cubes. And once again, please don't ask me for lube recommendations, just figure it out yourself. Most silicone lubes are not expensive. Just take the time to do it, and you will be more well off for it, because then you won't have to rely on buying premium cubes from any store. And you might not even want to once you've done this, because you'll find you probably prefer, the way you do it. Because you know what you like, and cube stores, they can only really cater to the masses so much. So yep, that's how I lube cubes, that's how I maintain them, that's how I clean them, that's what I do with them. Let me know what you think. More rambles coming soon.